Hello and welcome to UX Leadership by Design. I'm Mark Baldino, your host. I'm also the co-founder of Fuzzy Math. Fuzzy Math is the user experience design consultancy that brings consumer-grade UX to business applications for B2B and enterprise tools. And today I speak with Joe Sticca, who's a technology, product, and operations executive and serves in a fractional component as a fractional leader for his clients. And I think for the first time on the podcast, we almost exclusively talk about AI and the impact on design and product management. But we kind of get beyond the obvious that these tools can and should save us time and make us more efficient in our work. And we kind of shift to like, what's the mindset or the skill set that you all need, the mindset that we need to build to use Gen AI to its max output. And Joe uses this analogy of a senior editor who kind of generates less, but uses critical thinking to edit more. And then it's like, okay, hey, we've saved all of this time. Now, what can we spend that time on? And we should be focusing on things like being more creative about the solutions that we create and spending more time in that space, how to create things of value for our users. Or maybe we can have more time to do more extensive A/B or multivariate testing. And then even better, we now have that data in a model that can generate some output that is maybe a little bit less biased than we would create as humans. And so I think the podcast overall, we're really trying to cover, yes, Gen AI is here to stay, but how can it positively impact the design and product management processes and what you all can be working on in the short term to better position yourselves as designers and product managers, design and product leaders into the future. So, as always, thank you very much for listening and please enjoy the episode. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. Really appreciate your time today. As is traditional with podcasts, give the audience a sense of your background, how you got to where you are, and kind of what you're up to these days.
Yeah, my background has predominantly been basically one foot in technology and technology development, being an old software developer myself, and the ability to kind of manage technology resources and get involved in architecture. And my other foot has been in really design and getting new digital experiences to market, and have gone through the various phases of what those digital experiences are and mean to be from Web 2 to Web 3.
Awesome. And how did was it a transition from software development? Like, was there a period where you like made the conscious choice, or did you start to see yourself being pulled into like product and design over time?
Yeah, more of the latter. More
Okay.
of the latter. I've been very blessed with the experiences I've had professionally, but also through my mentors, and always thinking of user journeys, and was once called, process journeys or process reengineering, then became user experience journeys. So it was always something that kind of inched my way into that respective element of the job, and becoming more product centric or digital experience product centric.
And how have you found? I mean, if you're still doing that work, I'm assuming you're enjoying that side of the house. Do you miss the development component at all?
I do, yeah, the actual development and the actual coding, maybe not so much, but obviously with all the tools coming out and have been coming out in generative AI and code development, it's bringing back a little nostalgia, and it actually intrigued me a bit. So maybe I could get back into it a little bit.
It is interesting. Gen AI, I think for people who are in the engineering space are using it, and I feel like people who aren't in the engineering space, it's. I think I told somebody 80% of my mid or long form content like goes through Gen AI at some point. It doesn't always start there, but it like probably gets uh, cleaned up along the way. But actually, like having it code things for me has been like really like even just Google spreadsheet like formulas. I'm like I was just doing our financial planning for next year, and I have this. I manually add up a bunch of rows because depending on the month, I have expenses in the past which are actual and projected expenses, and writing a formula that based on the date that knows to switch rows was really hard for me. And then I just put it into I put it into ChatGPT, and it's a simple Excel query, or it's in Google Sheets, but it's like really powerful to be able to do some of that stuff without having to feel like you have to learn the whole language. So I don't know if your experience is similar. You said it's jogging your memory and having you involved a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I remember as a developer, anytime you had to do systems integration or integrations between system, if you were lucky if you had an API or you had to create some data processing of extraction and uploading and things of that sort, and then moved into APIs. And then obviously, to of late, we've had the widgets and the galore of widgets between systems, whether
Yeah.
it be platform CRM or marketing automation platforms into database and vice versa. And these widgets, always this progression of doing low code or no code. So, and always using the administrator, if you will, or someone like myself getting into it is setting up these integrations as a use case in this conversation. And now you could just talk to a generative AI chatbot
Yeah.
and say, I need XYZ integrated and I need this data to go from A to B. And I could set up these thresholds and these case statements, if you will, and it will just take care of it. Now, it doesn't take care of it 100%. You still need to kind of, do some work and implementation and some testing. Of course, that's always, and that can test it for you as well. But rather than figuring it out, you could just chat and
Yeah.
discuss it to get it done.
100%. Yeah, I think people forget the recursive nature of these tools. Is it's not one and done, but like it's literally before this call, I was working on that spreadsheet and it was skipping January, and I'm asking it, why are you skipping January?
Right,
And it's not
right,
quite sure. So it's giving me a bunch of alternatives, both of which didn't work. So I have to actually do like a little bit of debugging, but it got me 95% of the way there, and probably will eventually get me to 100% of the way there. But it is really like if businesses are looking for an efficiency boost, it is an efficiency tool, at least
for
the
sure.
ones I use. And I think that that's to my benefit, that I'm not, as a business owner, I'm not spending 6 hours trying to figure out some crazy Excel query or writing some bit of JavaScript. I can actually just have a machine do it because it's frankly better at it than I am.
Right. And it's going to be quite interesting because there's so many functional augmentation into these platforms, whether it be a Microsoft Copilot
Yeah.
or like a Salesforce.com with, I believe, Einstein. There are a lot of these augmentation of this functionality, this generative functionality that's blending into the platforms. And in some respect, it's going to get very interesting in seeing what really is the differentiator, because a lot of these LLMs or small language models, when they're more localized and you're not putting it out into a platform in the public like a ChatGPT, is what is really going to be the differentiator. And in some respects, just like anything, I could see it get commoditized because people will just assume it's a functional element, whereas software of old is really about getting an install or getting users onto your software, and you're building that moat, that barrier or that switching cost. So the switching cost was always high. So if I had, X number of users on a platform, to switch them over was always difficult. But now with these generative AI tools being very voluminous, everyone could jump in and out of them. And I used, just in the last 3 weeks, I've used three or four of them to generate various things like presentations and videos and other things. And they all relatively perform the same way. So where is that barrier or where is that switching cost element? So
Yeah, I'm still falling back on ChatGPT because it's the one I've used the most, and I have like threads that are set up, like my home marketing plan for that I set up last year this time
right,
for 2024 is in there. So I just continue to ask it questions. But we're HubSpot users, and I was using HubSpot's chat to set up reports, and it didn't do a great job. And I immediately sort of lost trust in it, and I was like,
right,
well, it's got
right,
all my data, which is really really good. But I asked
right,
a very simple thing, which was give me a report of a breakdown of just the dollar amount of deals that enter the pipeline by month
right,
in 2024. And that's not a hard thing for it to do, but it sort of goofed. And then I asked it for it again. And then I just said, can you just give me the count? And it gave me two numbers, and it's apologizing. And it's like, there is table stakes in terms of like you need it
right,
in your
right,
tool.
right,
But it's also like, if it's not really ready for prime time, I think it can be a challenge for products, because not that it makes me lose trust in HubSpot, but I go back to what HubSpot's done for me in the past, which is really information classification and
Sure,
some little reporting.
sure.
So I do think there's a challenge of like, if I'm comparing it with the latest model of ChatGPT, which I've helped sort of train some around some of my
Exactly.
content, and I'm comparing
Exactly.
that to, HubSpot's. I don't even know what HubSpot's using, but
Right.
it's the, you break down a little bit of trust, which I don't know if
Of
people totally
course.
think
And
about.
and it also is part of that learning, as you mentioned, and what you've used more and more. But functionally, they kind of stay in the same realm, or will be in the same realm. And I'm not too familiar with HubSpot, a little more on Einstein and so forth. But
Yeah. I think you're right. We're in a space now where it's integrated into your tool because it's expected, but we're still so early in what the capabilities are. And I don't think, unless you're really living in this and breathing the space every minute, you kind of know where those capabilities are going to be. But there's a ton of opportunity within products to integrate AI, I think, in meaningful and impactful ways, as
sure.
opposed to just adding it.
Oh, for sure. And there's a couple of smart guys out there with platforms that cut across the agents. So there's some generative platforms that will say, no, we actually use Claude, we use ChatGPT, and we use Gemini. So they'll give you the flavor across all three. So
Interesting.
and that goes back to, coding has become easier, right?
Yeah.
So the ability to innovate and the ability to come out with new features or new platforms is the timeline has shrunk considerably. So
100%.
right.
How are you seeing it impact like the broader industry in product management and in design, either how people are integrating it into their work? I mean, we could talk about how it's being integrated into products and kind of how human to AI interactions are sort of shifting. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think everyone is as you mentioned a couple of minutes ago. There's efficiencies. Everyone sees the efficiencies. Everyone's using the tools that are either blended into their platforms, whether it be a Canva or a HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever the case, or a Copilot, and they'll use those because they're already blended into things they go to every day and they work in every day, as well as Zoom and their AI, and they've had that for a little while as well, and taking notes and giving back feedback. So that is a baseline everyone knows and everyone's going to play with. But
Yep.
materially, when we talk about things, and I would say anecdotally, I see folks in the development world, in the software development world, this actually having an impact, and in some respects, maybe not so positively. Meaning the notion of building and the notion of creating new product experiences now has been commoditized a little bit because these generative AI platforms could generate a good deal of the code, whether it be 50% of it, 75% of it, and actually can iterate and actually can test. So at that point, you start to wonder, okay, where does the value come into play? Because now that I can make things, if you will, efficient and streamlined internally to your operations as a company, but now you're going to be executing more quickly out to your clients or to your users. And some folks will get a head start, just like GPT got to a head start as a platform, and companies who do this quickly and get out to market will have a head start. As the old saying goes, first mover advantage. But I
Yeah.
actually am a believer of second mover advantage.
Hmm.
So the ability to kind of see what everyone else is doing and using that real life feedback coming from the marketplace and what is truly valuable. So if we were to kind of look at this and say, okay, the effects on people internally, and I use the metaphor of an editor in chief and being from a media and publishing kind of technology background, you have your story writers, you have your journalists, you have your, even in marketing agency, you have your writers and copywriters, but you really need to now stand back. And if you're treating the generative AI as a resource, obviously it's not a human resource, but it is a resource that is producing, you still have to evaluate in what you think that would be either effective or not effective in the marketplace. So, a lot of that isn't going to go away, at least right now. So the software developer may need to get a little more creative or a little more
Interesting.
involved in knowing the business, because a lot of times software developers, and being an old software developer, we like to stay in our craft,
Yeah.
and we like to do our craft very well. And we sometimes could get a little myopic, but at the same time, there are developers who see the other side and the business side of the experience in the business and what the strategic issues and values need to be in the marketplace. So I think that creative thought, or that editor in chief, and kind of deciphering what may or may not work, or what can be efficient, what's going to be valuable to the end user, is not going anywhere right now. But there is disruption, obviously, on the efficiency side of the equation in the production, right?
Yeah, for sure. So given your background in editing, you mentioned like some decision making process. You mentioned creativity. Like, who do you think in the short term, I don't want to say would win, but like, who do you see human beings? What if I'm a product or design individual contributor or leader? What like skills do I inherently have to have, or do I need to work on? And you can use the editor example if you want to be a better editor, versus maybe I think the opposite of that is like a pure creator, right?
Right,
I generate and then I edit along the way and send it out. Now something is helping me create and I'm editing. Like, what are some of the
right.
tools that people need to have to be better editors?
Right, and in an editor being the metaphor we're on here, is also potentially a product manager. It could be any business or technical owner of a business value that is launched in the marketplace. So from that standpoint, and then using the metaphor as an editor, it becomes even more important, in my view, is to know what others are doing. And it can sound very simplistic, but is very hard to execute on.
Yeah.
What others are doing and what is working and not working beyond the data. Okay. Because what these chat GBTs, or these AI platforms, have given us is the ability to kind of go out and get data back and get information back very quickly. So that kind of saves the time. But the contextual elements, how to make inferences from that, you still have to make inferences from that. So what I like to say is the chat GPTs of the world, or the Geminis, are the A+ students in college. They do a fantastic job in gathering information, synthesizing the information, and then spitting it back out in a wonderful narrative. And actually, that's what a lot of the business leaders have been doing for quite some time now. But that's now been codified. So now we have to take it a step further, and that's not enough anymore, in saying, okay, now contextually, how far can I take this? Or how far can I test this? Or maybe we need to get even more creative, because what that product is doing is, again, aggregating quickly, synthesizing quickly, which was most of what your job had to be anyway. Now you have to have the element, okay, what do I do with that? That becomes more important. Whereas before, it took you so much time just to get those two steps done, you didn't really have time to think about what elements of nuance that I could put into this.
Right. It's really interesting because I think some people would say the first step is maybe where creativity lies. We don't have to get into like a really in-depth conversation. I think
Sure, sure,
if
sure.
I'm
I
an
can see that.
artist, right? Like I do think
Right.
that that generative component is where my creativity lies. But I think you're kind of talking about creative problem solving and actually like
Exactly. Right.
harnessing
Right.
harnessing our brains where we're better in the short term than
Right.
AI, and harnessing AI or Gen AI where it's a little bit better. But because I wouldn't think that, and to use the coder, the engineer example, and again, I don't come from that background. Like I think what you're suggesting is, I want to make sure I understand, is like they're going to get this step. Oh, look at Apple's getting me a thumbs up. You're going to get this sort of step, uh, head start, and
Right.
then you're going to have more time to figure out, as you said, the nuances, how to make this more impactful for the user as an engineer, as opposed to we just have to get this baseline functionality. But am I getting the gist there?
Absolutely. And what I've done in my whole career, in any process when starting, whether it's maintaining or incrementally providing more value in an experience, or a digital workflow, or a new workflow, is the more eyes and ears I could have up front, even including the tester, the QA tester, they would all be part of the brainstorming process,
Yeah.
right? Because they all had their own perspectives. The engineers had their perspectives, and we would work, and not to kind of get into the weeds here, but we would all try to work into getting more eyes, more ears, more experiences, bringing to the table to figure out all the angles and what we're going to provide in this new endeavor, this new product that we want to launch. So now that's all that context were in people's minds, including, as I mentioned, the engineers, including the QA tester. So traditionally, that's, the QA tester just waits halfway down the line and starts testing, right? But now with all of these tools, all of that, not only the people are bringing that to bear of their experiences, but now the chat GPTs of the world and the Geminis of the world are bringing that to bear now into the conversation. So it speeds up and shortens that life cycle, which then the accountability and responsibility is still on the people in the room to say, now that we've shortened the time and we have all this information and we're bringing our own experiences, how now can we make things better? Because a lot of times on the whether it be movie production or you're producing a new web app or a new mobile app, things get lost in the editing process, right? It's like, okay, minimal viable product. We only have 2 to 4 months. What are our 3 releases? Well, now that we've shortened the life cycle of all this context coming into play, you have more opportunities now to make that minimal viable product richer. And you could start testing more, because now the best data, research data, is from the users who are using your experience that you created. So
100%.
I think it should allow for more in the minimal viable product to kind of keep this case study in this
Yeah.
conversation, if you will.
I like it a lot because, as I said, I tend to I recommend people. I tell people on my team as designers, like, you're not going to be pushing pixels as much as you are now in 3 to 5 years, and you're going to have more time. You're going to focus on things that are better for humans to focus on. But I really like the idea of saying, actually, you're going to be able to focus on expanding the idea set and validating that. And you're going to, all the things, frankly, that a lot of designers want to do that they don't have time to do. Product management is the same, right? It all gets compressed towards the end. No, if we can find some efficiency in our work and hopefully keep the same time frame, right?
Right,
Business leaders probably going to want you
right,
to chop it down. But let's say we have the same time frame, but we're compressing some steps early on. The
for sure.
really fun part and interesting part, which is, let's test more ideas. Let's, as humans, kind of generate more ideas and measure the impact from a customer satisfaction
Yeah,
or
and
user
also
value.
from a risk mitigation standpoint as well, because
Yeah,
a lot of times when development happens, new product ideas or new product launches or enhancement, risk mitigation or risk doesn't get addressed fully. But now you have the opportunity to reduce that risk because you're broadening your blinders a bit, because now you have
yeah,
more of that opportunity to test and uncover your blind spots. The worst thing in developing products is you hit a blind spot, and that's why you need to stay very flexible and agile, to use the term,
yeah.
and to quickly adjust. But now you could simulate that, or have the opportunity to simulate more options in a minimal viable product to reduce those blind spots.
That's amazing. I think it's a good metaphor, and I think it keeps people focused on where there are gaps in their process from a timing perspective, but also, like, what's the most valuable thing I can be doing for my organization right now. And I think this idea of testing multiple options faster, generating multiple options faster, and risk mitigation, that speaks to people who do product management and design, because um, there's very few people who feel so confident that they can just launch something into the market and know it's going to be successful. But I think risk mitigation and efficiency speaks to business as well, which is nice that you can have that sort of bottom up. This is why it's valuable, and then kind of top down why it's valuable to the people in kind of leadership. So it makes a lot of sense. I think this idea of skill sets people need to kind of work on, this sort of editor mindset, I think is really interesting. This efficiency and what can we do that's more valuable with the time we're going to get, not just more, but more valuable, I think, are two ways to sort of look at AI in a slightly different manner, which I like.
Right,
That's
right.
great. I'm going to use your example of second mover advantage, which I haven't had the opportunity to spend 25 minutes talking to somebody really just about AI in product and design. So I've enjoyed the time, but I'm kind of curious, like besides the time savings and the energy savings and spending more time and this editor mindset, where are you seeing kind of the future of product management and design shifting? It could be AI related or not, but just kind of from where we are in a current state in 2024 to where we might be in a year or two. What's your
Yeah,
prognostication?
I think the feedback, the speed of feedback is going to increase considerably. So whether you're building a new application or a new digital experience, or new streaming service or whatever the case, we've all relied on getting data feedback from the users, right? Have they viewed time on site? How many videos they watch? How long have they watched it? And it takes so much time and energy just to codify that.
Yeah.
There's been a lack of, in my experience, and it gets so difficult because of the lack of time, is what, again, are the nuances? What are the correlations of certain user behaviors with other user behaviors or within the same user? So it's not enough to say, yeah, time on site for these stories or time on site for these functionalities or watching videos and then making decisions that way. So now what we have is an opportunity again on the data feedback coming back. We've widened it and we've shortened the time. We'd have to wait for the reports. We've had to aggregate the reports. Yeah, one could argue you could set up these portals and these reporting dashboards on all these different platforms, whether it be Google Analytics or a million other tools that are out there like Tableau. But now, what are the inferences? Now, maybe we could get into correlation analysis or causation analysis. We've never really had the opportunity or time to do that. And that feedback of that data and then aggregating and codifying that data has taken so much time, and we're just looking at data, right? So good old statistics comes back, and people will use R and they'll use statistical programs to try to run, but they're not able to think around it. They're just doing the work and the functional work to create the report. Once you have the report, it's like, all right, now how the hell do I get behind these numbers? So now with these generative AI platforms, we could get behind these numbers to continue the conversation. Whereas before, we're trying to squeeze in a meeting. How many meetings do we have a week, right? And we're trying to squeeze in the meetings, to review analytics and then make changes in the experience based on those analytics.
Yes.
And that takes forever. And
Yes.
no one really wants to make a decision because they're
Right.
afraid they might be wrong.
Right.
And so there's this competing commitment of the employee, if you will, the resource, to say, well, I want to jump in on these numbers and see what it's saying, but at the same time I don't want to be too creative, because it might be wrong and they're afraid of being wrong. It might affect my performance. Well, now you depersonalize that with these generative AI platforms to not only bring that information back more quickly, but drop it in raw into these generative AI platforms and say, give me your inference. And at least that way it depersonalizes the conversation, which, as a product person in all my career, the more you could depersonalize a brainstorming and a conversation and you could react on something, the
Mm-hmm.
more fruitful and the more Socratic the process, thereby eliminating the blind spots.
And the bias. That
Yeah.
was a little. I like that nugget you just dropped there around depersonalizing, because very easy for folks to get to bring their bias and bring their background, and not that maybe there isn't some inference that you need to make, but I absolutely love this idea here, which is um, always pushing my clients to get the data right, and sometimes they aren't able to track it, sometimes they don't have the time to.
Right.
And you're right. Like the times I've done like statistical, I never took a stats class. So me doing statistical analysis, questionable, but I've used some third party tools of mostly survey data. It takes forever. And
Yeah.
then, you're sort of looking at it. Okay, what do I do with this? The idea that you, as you said, drop it into an LLM, but then it actually has the context of what you've been doing all the way along the way. So it's not just, it has context from how you got there. And now you're going to give it more
Right.
data to help guide like future decision makings. That's like insanely powerful. And I'm sure somebody's working on a product that does something like this for the
Well,
product design and
yeah,
development process.
there
But
there are products on these, and to take that a little further, is that there are products, even simple products, not simple products. Zapier, a great product platform, they've augmented new AI
Yep.
chat platforms inside of their product where you could just talk to how you want these integrations I mentioned earlier to happen, but also to track the data and then generate a new ad. Let's say it's an ad. And based on the data and the ad performance that comes back, this then can generate a new ad and push it straight out. So it's not just about collecting the data, but acting on it more quickly,
Amazing.
whereas you don't have to wait for that Friday meeting or that Monday meeting to make a decision. You could give some thresholds to the chat AI to generate the ads and then push those out more quickly and then figuring that out. So it's A/B testing, at a whole new level and a whole
At a
new
whole new
speed.
level.
And as we as humans and resources, we have to bring to bear saying, okay, we don't want the knee jerking or hallucinations happening, and we have to be mindful of that. So we have to be more mindful and use more of our peripheral vision than more than anything, rather than our direct vision saying, I see the numbers, let's make a change on the call to action and let's push it out next week. Now I need to be more peripheral.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Listen, I could talk to you about this for a long time. And I think honestly, I mentioned this second mover advantage, which I haven't done like a ton of podcasts on AI. It's come up here and there. And I feel fortunate to be chatting with you about it because you framing it, I think, in a really understandable manner in terms of like what people need to work on to use generative AI tools better. Like what skills do they kind of need to hone that might not be some of the harder skills that they learned as a designer or an engineer, and then also how it can fit in to the digital product design and development process is like really really powerful. So I appreciate your framing, Joe, and really appreciate your time today on the podcast. Would love if people want to continue the conversation or want to reach out to you. I know you do some fractional leadership work as well. Like, where can they find you? What are you kind of up to these days? What are good topics for people to reach out to you
Right.
on?
The best way is always I through my LinkedIn profile. That's usually the best and easiest way to reach me. And I live in there and I try to do the best I can to live into what I always say and try to work with my fractional clients. I have a couple of fractional clients working on technology and digital product experiences and also Web3 elements and new channels in Web3, such as the Roblox of the world or Decentraland, and actually how does tokenization actually increase customer loyalty platforms. Customer loyalty, I think, is going to be a new reinvention with AI and tokenization as we kind of go. So it's some exciting stuff that I appreciated connecting both technology and digital experiences and using Web3 tools. And not to go down maybe an older topic like metaverse, only a couple of years old,
Yeah,
but these new channels like Roblox and Decentraland, as I mentioned, or they've been around, not necessarily new, are becoming more fruitful for brands. And basically, these are not gaming platforms as we traditionally think; they're social platforms.
engagement platforms.
So yeah, these are great projects that I'm working on right now with clients, and I enjoyed also working with an expert system, financial audit and financial modeling company. And I appreciate the opportunities I've had to blend again my technology and digital experience. And LinkedIn is the best way to reach me right now. And who knows, maybe I'll start putting up my own website.
You should. I think you have a lot of important things to say. You're really working in really interesting, that last part, you're working in some really interesting spaces. So again, thank you for your time today. It is much appreciated. I know the audience is going to enjoy the episode. So thanks very much, Joe.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
You bet.